Hey fellas, hope you guys doing great. In today's video we will see, what if Naruto reincarnated as Alicorn and built Harem with Luna, Chrysalis, Rarity, Lyra, Part 4. Huge shout out to Ethereal Trixster for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe and like the video. So let's start the story. Naruto glanced at the Earth Pony on stage and sighed. Yes, they had failed to buy tickets for the Blue Stall group, and now Chrysalis and him were watching this Alicorn. The entire show had been a joke. Since he got on stage, all he did was simple sleight of hand tricks that he was sure a certain showmare could perform back in Ponyville. But this was the first 10 minutes, hopefully the next hour and a half would be worth the price added to Celestia's tab. For my next trick, I'm going to call forth a creature no equestrian but myself has seen before. The blonde looked on interest. If this Alicorn did summon something cool, he'd buy out the next showing. Alright, is every pony ready? Naruto cheered in excitement as the crowd looked on as a plume of smoke rose from the stage. It slowly rose, revealing a large spider looking at the Earth Pony. The Alicorn's hooves couldn't help but clap at the sheer awesomeness of this performance. The spider towered over the Earth Pony. Its legs seemed as long as Celestia's mane, and the gruesome underbite couldn't help but get a snicker from the crowd, its exoskeleton a large bulky brown as. Did you see that, Chrysalis? That was pretty cool compared to all of his other lame tricks so far. His eyes glanced away from the show, wanting to see her expression of awe. She was trembling at the sight of the spider. Chrysalis, what's wrong? Come on, answer me, what's wrong? She couldn't respond to his question. If she dared open her mouth, all she would do is scream, and then he'd find her. She would never forget that creature. It plagued her nightmares ever since she was a larva. Her father standing over one of those things ripped in half as the other skittered away, leaving a trail of violence in his wake. Metamor consoled her on countless nights, reassuring her that it was just a dream, there were no such things. But she knew better, and here was undeniable proof. Chrysalis, come out, I can smell you. Its proclamation echoed off the walls as she slunk farther into her chair, its fangs coated in blood as it looked on at the crowd. If you don't respond, I'll kill each pony until you are the last one left. The crowd went into a panic as they realized what was truly going on. They scrambled towards the exits as strands of silk flew through the air, covering each door and whatever pony that was caught in it. Naruto watched as the spider looking on at the crowd, its mandibles clacking together, searching for her. What is that thing, Chrysalis? His eyes never wandering too far from the spider. That's why we left, Naruto. Dad said we left because there was no more food, but the Badlands is full of emotions. She closed her eyes, remembering the vivid details of the night once more. Naruto, can you do me a favor? She looked at him, his eyes full of determination. The only thing stopping him from attacking was the chance someone else would get hurt. Yeah, sure, but can it wait? That thing wants you and it doesn't look friendly. No, it can't wait, Naruto. I want you to kiss me, please. But why? Naruto turned towards her, harlequin eyes full of emotion, hoping he'd find an answer to her sudden request. Realization dawning on the Alicorn, knowing what she was about to do. No, you can't do that. He's probably going to eat. Why? Her lips pressed against his, her tongue stopping any real words coming from his mouth. She savored the kiss. It was her first and probably her last, so she'd enjoy this memento even as the arachnid did unspeakable things to her. Chrysalis's body reverted back to its original form. She could imagine him weeping in sadness as the thought of her dying echoed in his mind. She was just grateful she sucked the anger out before he did anything rash. You know, that was nice. I'm glad I got to kiss you before everything went downhill. Please don't come after me, Naruto. She didn't resist as the silk stuck to her wings, yanking her towards the creature. The blonde froze, his emotions in turmoil. He didn't know what to feel as he gazed at her smiling form. Is it that easy to accept defeat? I thought she was better than this. Didn't she want to see all of Equestria when they made an alliance with the changelings? Why couldn't he act? What was stopping him from plowing into that monster's face and ripping him apart one leg at a time? He glanced as the spider wrapped her in a cocoon. He wanted to know why he couldn't do anything. What did you do, Chrysalis? I made a choice, Naruto, and I hope you will respect my decision. Her eyes showed the sympathy of what selfless actions would do to the Alicorn. What are you going to do to her, spider? Arachnid turned toward the vermin, his back legs already placing Chrysalis on his back. I'm going to devour this fine specimen of a morsel. Do you want to stop me like your fellow equestrians? Let me tell you they all failed. Its eyes watched the Alicorn stood still, his body trembling most likely with rage. It wouldn't matter, his legs were ready to jump on a moment's notice. See you later, stallion. I can't wait to meet again. Naruto watched as the spider jumped away, his hooves already galloping to the stage, the crowd letting the Alicorn barrel past them. Where'd that spider go? His magical tail latching onto the roof as he pulled himself up, cerulean eyes following the spider as it jumped from building to building with Chrysalis screaming on its back. I'm coming, Chrysalis! His shout roared over Las Pegasus, as every pony looked up to see the shadow of an Alicorn passing over them. He grunted as the king's horn pressed against his. The only thing stopping the brute from slicing off his own horn was the barriers wrapped around it. Cerulean eyes stared into a mixture of sapphire blue and ruby red as the both jumped back. It had been a stalemate ever since the spider left. Are you still under his control? His mind pondering the situation as his attacks became swifter and more precise. No, I'm not equestrian filth. His words carried on through the desert as the king grinned at the discomfort of the stallion. I've been bit before, equestrian, and I'm the only one to have killed one of those spiders. Then why fight? This won't solve anything. If I don't stop you here, more of your kind will come and stop my people from taking over Las Pegasus. His eyes settled as the ruby red swirled around it, his mind clearly made up as his beetle-like wings flapped rapidly, carrying his body into the air. You'll die here, the ones you brought here will surely die, and when everything is all done, my people will assimilate into Equestria and destroy it from the inside out. Words dripped with venom as the king dropped towards the unicorn, his horn enveloped with magic as both collided once again, the captain of the guard sliding across the dirt, his hocks aching at the sudden pressure from the king's dive bomb attack. TCH, why do you persist with those pointless defenses? Do you not see me as an equal in combat? Perhaps if I made the pink one my personal worst, would you change your mind then? I don't see you as an equal, but I can't let what you just said slide. I'll show it to you once. Why I'm the captain of the Royal Guards. One time please, you better show me everything that you have if you want the slightest chance of beating me. That's what I intend to do. His horn began glowing a red darker than the light rose the every pony he knew was accustomed to. He didn't bother watching as the changeling dive bomb at him again. The clash of the magical produced blade faced off against the magical coated horn of shining armors. The victor was decided in an instant as blood splattered across the unicorn's face. The difference between us wasn't our resolve to protect those precious to us, it was how far we would go to protect the ones we love. I hope you remember that when you see your daughter again. The unicorn didn't bother looking back at the scene. He soundly defeated the changeling king with that attack, the lopped-off horn to his left still brimming with magic. Is that it? You think that I will quit with such a petty injury? I am King Metamer, ruler of the changelings. He roared out as he tried to form magic where his horn used to be. The realization of how powerless he was now just began settling in. The king now knew why Celestia sent so few of her fellow equestrians to the hive. They never saw them as a threat, only what the chaos they could incite scared them. This was their battle already. The equestrians had won the war before it even started. Why didn't you finish me? I swore to Cadence I wouldn't take another life, and despite what you said, I'm a stallion of my word. Will you spare my army? That isn't up to me, but I can't imagine any pony finding the genocide of one race justifiable, so you shouldn't worry. His eyes just stared on at the moon, wondering if Cadence was all right. Now it's your turn to answer my question. How did you defeat one of those spiders? I don't know, my magic cut through the one so easily. My second attempt did nothing but bounce of its shell. We retreated after that attempt, the rest is history. Then answer me this, why could you use reason when it was so clear that it was controlling you? That one is simple. I despise you, unicorn, I still do, but I know when I've met my superior, so that overcame the stupid mindless berserker attacks. So emotions overcame the venom coursing through your veins, that's good to know. Metamor, that spider you saw, it will die today. His hooves slowly moving forward as the 10 minutes has passed since the outcome of Shining Armor's battle. Cadence horn glue as the wounds slowly started to disappear on the unicorn by her side, the Alicorn's thoughts elsewhere, as she felt Shining Armor's magic flare, a sign of things weren't boding well for her special pony. You promised armor. I hope to see that you didn't change your ways. Her eyes traveled downwards, the stallion finally opening his eyes. Her work was done for now. Don't push yourself, Crescent. I did heal you, but you will be sore for many days to come. She watched him nod as he slowly rose to his hooves. Now tell me what happened and why you thought it was a smart idea to jump off that casino. That wasn't my intention originally, but the other option wasn't ideal. Oh, and what was that option? Getting my head ripped from my body and becoming his dinner doesn't seem like a great idea. I see, so you took the option with the best chance of survival then. What did you want to tell me before you collapsed? The changeling army is coming to invade Las Pegasus. What are we going to do? They should be here any minute. You can't do anything but sit and watch. I'll take care of the changelings. Chrysalis gave me an idea and I want to see if it has merit. She gazed down the streets of Las Pegasus, wondering if any pony here ever cared about one another. Crescent, do you have a special some pony? The army of changelings began walking through, turning the citizens of Las Pegasus in an uproar as the very sight of them. I don't, Princess, but what does that have to do with anything, Princess Cadence? He watched as the citizens locked themselves away into whatever homes they could. It has everything to do with the current situation. Love and all sorts of emotions is why they are here, and that's how we will conquer these simple-minded creatures. She waited for a response, only to see the unicorn preoccupied with the citizens' well-being. Her horn took on a cornflower blue glue as a small heart floated to the center of toe. It slowly began to get bigger and bigger. The changelings, drawn to the smell of love wafting off the magical first to approach the giant heart, was a changeling no bigger than a filly. Its fangs bit deeply into the construct as the power of love flew through its veins, its eyes turning a shade of pink as the heart popped. A flood of pink magic filled emotion sweeping over the streets of Las Pegasus. Princess Cadence, what did you do? I gave them the feeling of love that they wanted, but they most likely interpret as lust. So what you're saying is they are going to? Only their own kind, of course. We can't have these changelings raping countless equestrians now, can we? We can't really let them do that in the public either, can we? No, we can't. Can you make a barrier for them to exhaust themselves with such carnal pleasures? His horn glowed a bright yellow as cards encompassed the lust-driven changelings. The darkness did nothing to stop the grunts of the sexually frustrated changelings. What about the rest of Las Pegasus that was caught up in that wave of magic? I'm sure they won't do anything too unnecessary. My concern isn't really about what just happened, rather what is tomorrow's headlines going to be. I'm sure you can cook up a good lie. His eyes still scanning the card-made dome, a rainbow-haired mare coming to his head. Can I ask you something, Princess Cadence? I'm sure you will anyway, but yes, you may. Her face couldn't help but smile as he regaled her with a tale of what happened to them before receiving the letter to help her with negotiations. 2 minutes after Cadence's victory. She didn't bother looking back. She knew he was right on her flank. The only thing stopping him from outright crashing into her was the constant turns she would take to throw the Pegasus off. A sharp right did nothing but send her male comrade off by a mere second. He was just too fast to lose track of, so she could retaliate. Every trick she'd used didn't deter the Pegasus, as his presence only changed the slightest. The mare only had a few tricks left, and it didn't seem like any one of them would help the Pegasus in this situation. There was only option left as her wings slowly retracted. Her body slammed into the stallion, both crashing into the cold desert ground. Bad idea. Horrible idea. God, hanging around both of them has rubbed off on me. Her wings weren't broken, but she was willing to bet a hefty amount of bits that she wouldn't be able to fly straight for about a week. Her eyes turned towards her enemy/friend, his body crushed under hers, the wings mangled beyond all recognition, and yet those ruby eyes still looked on at her. So you're still Awa? His hooves immediately wrapped around her throat, his hooves as strong as ever as she failed about trying to get free for the slightest bit of air. Her elbows slamming into his muzzle, finally letting him go. The reprieve was all she needed to roll off the stallion and get much-needed air. You had enough yet? She glanced at the Pegasus starting to stand on his hooves. Her first concerns for both of their well-being took a turn for the worse as she saw the full extent of his wounds from her impromptu idea. He wouldn't be flying for a long time. The wings were easily broken, even she knew that they weren't supposed to bend backwards. A few bones stuck out at the oddly bent wings. The blood dripped heavily to the ground. Saurin, please stop. If you keep this up, you are going to die. She didn't want this. Saurin was always there for her, and he loved her, and each step he took more blood dripped to the ground. His breathing labored as the adrenaline of their game of tag finally wearing down. Saurin, you love me, right? She could see that small freckle of green slowly appearing in his eyes. As he took another step forward, more blood dropping to the ground, she had to say it now. Saurin Skyrider, I love you, and if you don't snap out of it, I swear to Celestia I'll never forgive you. Saurin couldn't move. In fact, time froze for him when she said those 5 words. Did she mean it? That nagging voice begged to say otherwise. In fact, it screamed that she was toying with his emotions. He watched the mare approach him, tears streaming down her face as she looked down at him, emerald green finally returning to his eyes. Do you mean that, what you said? Of course I meant it. Now please let's just stop. I don't think I can take kicking your flank any more than I have to. She chuckled as the last flicker of ruby flickered from his eyes. Saurin, I have to ask, can you walk? I can barely stand, Spitfire, so no, I won't be going back with you. I think I'll stay here for a while. Like Celestia you are, I'll carry you back if I have to. You know that wouldn't work. I could wrap my front hooves around you, but my lower half would just hit you each time you walk. Then you'll just have to mount me then, won't you? Her eyes dared him to say something. In fact, she wanted him to think of something, so she could prove how dumb his idea was, not that Spitfire's was any brighter. You are serious about this, aren't you? His voice showing the hesitance of the idea. He loved Spitfire, yes, but this was a little extreme even as she backed up into him. Skip if you don't want to see a slight lemon. Saurin, if it makes you feel any better, I order you to mount me. She didn't even bother looking at him as his front hooves wrapped around her neck, his length sliding into her cavern, both adjusting to the strange predicament, and imagining the first time with each other much differently. Saurin, one last thing. Her inner walls clamping down tightly on his member, getting a groan of satisfaction from the stallion. Yes, Spitfire? I don't want a foal yet, so if you know, pull out. Gotcha. The Pegasus said nothing as they enjoyed each other's one more than the other, Spitfire walking towards the brightly lit city of Las Pegasus. You guys can read now, the lemon is over. About 40 minutes after that. Naruto's hooves ached and body chilled as the wind blew against his frame, but he was here wherever that was. His eyes stared on at the giant rock in front of him, countless holes, most likely tunnels etched into the cliff's face. He could hear her yells of pain echo out the tunnels, like a constant taunt of which one to pick. His eyes went back and forth between the countless tunnels, desperately trying to keep the element of surprise. I forgot which one that thing went in. He looked back at the tunnels, trying to recall some sort of memory that had the answer to it. His options seemed meek as he mustered his courage. Chrysalis, answer me! The roar echoed through the tunnels as a faint green glow came in response, gave him the answer he needed. She didn't want to die, so when that loud call echoed through the catacombs of the cave, she responded with the only thing that could help her savior. Blood dripping freely across her stomach as another leg made a scratch across her skin, a few droplets hitting the ground. Arachnid lapped at the blood dripping from her like some dog. It was disgusting just watching as it looked up at her. Why don't you kill me now? The sound of galloping echoing through the cave, her hope all pinned on whoever was brave or dumb enough to follow her. Foolish changeling, when you wait 20 years for such a morsel, you don't devour it like some animal, you savor it. It could hear the sound coming closer and closer to them. Chrysalis was just leading another to its grave, and he'd oblige wholeheartedly. Arachnid's legs clung to a thread as it climbed upwards out of the green light. Naruto charged forth. The tunnel twisted but never turned. With each hoof step he made, the blonde was more positive that this was the changeling's former home. Countless strands of webbing clung to him as he burst forth into the main entrance of the old changeling home, his horn glowing with intense vermilion red as the blonde studied the area around him. The changeling princess was right in front of him, but yet no spider those cerulean eyes could see. Chrysalis, your old home sucks. It's a bunch of tunnels, and web, no scenery at all. She held back the tears as she watched Naruto crack a joke at such a crucial time. You are a complete idiot, you know that. You would have saved countless changeling lives, but instead you came here for me. Then let me ask you this one question, and if I don't like the answer, then I'll leave, okay? His cerulean eyes hardened as the harlequin eyes glared back. Do you want to live? Yes. Again. His face never betrayed the icy stare. He wanted more than that simple answer. Yes. Louder! I want to live. I want to see all of Equestria, spend it with the one I love. That's all I wanted to hear, Chrysalis. I'm going to save you. He couldn't help but grin from ear to ear as the shadow of death loomed over him, his eyes glancing downwards, his horn discharging all the pent-up magic he stored. His body crashing into the spiders like a missile as they both jettisoned into the wall, deep's cracks embedding around the two crash site as they both fell to the ground. Narret getting up almost instantaneously. Well, that should about take care of High. The long leg swiped across his body, barbs creating small scratches across his torso as he finally stopped skidding on the ground. The one at the city, of course you had to be a hero. Too bad all that boasting will do nothing but satisfy me with another meal. It smirked as the few drops of blood dripped to the ground. It wouldn't die by this pathetic being, it would live to see the day its master returned in its righteous glory. I don't want to fight, I just want Chrysalis and I'll leave. His voice steady as the spider drew its fangs once more, a bolt of magic crashing into its legs. A small spurt of blood trickled down where its appendage used to be, leaving two of the room's occupants in the catacombs in a state of confusion of what just happened. That was supposed to trip you, sorry about that. I'll kill you for that. Its fangs widened as another blast rang out, his left fang missing, and the fear of death actually seemed possible. So want another one, or can I leave with Chrysalis? His eyes never wavered, but his brain begged to find an answer. Those attacks were relatively weak and the Alicorn knew it firsthand, so why did it lop off a leg and one of its fangs so easily? What am I doing wrong? That thing should be howling in pain without the bleeding. The blonde stepped forth, his confidence never wavering as the spider lunged forward again. A giant blast of magic shot forth, enveloping half the spiders as blood scattered across the room, its innards falling loosely to the floor as the blonde looked somberly at his kill. I just wanted you to stop, that was it, spider. If you would have let us leave, and you could have lived a life in solitude. She sniffed the air. She had a small inkling of what happened, her nose sniffing the blonde's body as he freed her from the cocoon prison. It was love that saved all those years ago, and that same affection did it today. The changeling princess was sure of it as she glanced at the body, her thoughts mulling over what she knew of its master Discord. A being of chaos that's said to have only one true rival in magical strength, yet was it capable of creating a being that could only be slain by love? It seemed ridiculous no matter which way she looked at it. Her savior glanced at the corpse, his eyes still ashamed with what he had done. Don't be ashamed or ever feel guilty for what you have done today, Naruto. You saved me today and saved countless others from meeting death by this one's hands. Chrysalis, have you ever killed something? I have killed Naruto. All changelings have to. It's a rite of passage before they are accepted into the swarm. Does it ever get easier then? No, it doesn't, but the fact that you asked, that means you are better off than most. These words comforted the blonde. Perhaps tonight he'd be able to get a peaceful sleep. Chrysalis, let's get you home. That said, a small green flash of magic and the three bodies disappeared. 3 days had passed, and besides the fact that 2 of their assigned bodyguards were residing in a Las Pegasus hospital, and Metamor having a hissy fit over the spider's corpse being took back to Equestria, things seemed to have settled down. Shining Armor and Cadence talked with Metamor about the Changeling Society. He could overhear that much, but every time he tried approaching the topic they shied away. It was a bit annoying to say the least. Crescent was up to something, he was sure of it, but other than the occasional dodge of a changeling's bite, he had no proof of what the unicorn was up to. His eyes turned toward Chrysalis sitting on top of the hive looking down at the lot of them. Things might have seemed the same for him, but he knew better. She all but confessed to him and he didn't say a thing to her. How could he in the first place? Didn't he promise Luna to take things slowly? Why do things have to be so complicated? These past few days had been awkward to say the least. She had a responsibility now. Yet she lingered for more than ruling over a mindless empire that wanted to see the world, like she stated in a desperate plea to that lovable Alicorn. Her harlequin eyes stared at him, a small smile creeping on her face as she contemplated his thoughts on her confession. Naruto, could you come up here for a second? I have something I want to ask you. She honestly didn't expect him to fly up to her clumsily, if she might add, and she definitely didn't expect him to sit next to her, especially with all this awkward tension between them. "So what did you want, Chrysalis, or do I call you queen now?" His cerulean eyes smiled at the new role of leadership she'd be taking, wondering what she had in store for the changelings as he gazed at her. "Naruto, I realized something that day when I shouted into your face. I want to see all of Equestria and meet countless ponies, like countless changelings have done. I never wanted to be queen, Naruto." Harlequin eyes looked at the blonde, wondering what thoughts he could be pondering at the moment. "What about the changelings and your father, do they know?" His voice croaked out, both looking forward as Celestia's magic rose the sun. "My father does, he wants me to stay, but my mind has already been made. Naruto, do you think that I'm being petty, putting my own needs over my country's? Please answer me honestly." "No, if I was in your hooves I'd do the same thing." "So what are you going to do, Chrysalis? Where are you going to stay is what I'm asking." "That's my next question, Naruto, can I stay with you?" He paused. Was this what those three were talking about? Did they honestly think that he'd turn a friend down? Not in a million years. "Of course you can stay with me, the more the merrier, right?" Her hooves wrapped around him as he grinned at her affection. "I do have one problem though, you need to get some things for your room." Chrysalis pulled away, her eyes squinting at the blonde. "Wait, I get my own room?" "Yeah, what did you think, we were going to share a room?" A shy nod was his only answer, his cheeks reddening at the thought of him and Chrysalis sharing the same bed. "Crescent wouldn't like that, and besides you'll be right next to mine." "Naruto, don't you want to share your bed with me? I could be your special friend." She couldn't help but chuckle as his face grew deeper. It was so fun toying with him. "I mean, is it alright if I come galloping if I get scared?" Her hoof rubbed against his muzzle as the blonde started sputtering aloud. "Or are you interested in a certain mare back in Equestria?" Her face leaned in the smell of anxiety and nervousness wafting off of him, as her tone became that of a whisper. "It's alright if you do, I'm willing to share if she is." The changeling couldn't help but snicker as his body fell against hers. The small drips of blood coming from the Alicorn was a little weird, but still flattering that he considered herself beautiful. "I love that about you, Naruto, but still I wonder who I'll have to beat or share your heart with." Her eyes settled on her father, his horns still in the grasp of the equestrians, both eyes locking as a simple nod was all that was needed. "Scrawl!" Metamer's voice rang out through the wasteland, his tone a little softer than before, something only the changelings could tell what it means. The horde of them scrambled out of the tunnels, their bright eyes glued in her, as the Alicorn awoke next to her. "Changelings, equestrians, you all know that I have been appointed your ruler now." Her eyes traced the crowd, each equestrian slightly interested in her speech, most knowing why was going to happen already. "My father was dehorned in battle, yet I do not wish to take up the mantle as Queen Chrysalis, so I'm abdicating my throne, back to my father under the guise that he keeps peace with Equestria now that our army has been soundly defeated." She could hear them scrawling among themselves. They probably didn't care for what she had to say, they just wanted their next meal. "So for your sakes please be careful." She saw the changelings look at her, none with the compassion she had expected. The only scraws of encouragement she received was for the two most loyal to her. "Hey, why are you addressing them as though you won't see them again?" Naruto wondered as he stared at the crowd. The two changelings were singled out rather quickly for this Alicorn's taste. "I'm not coming back, Naruto. Metamor won't let me leave, so I'll have to abandon the changeling swarm and go on my own from now on." "So when you asked me to stay at my house you meant it?" "I don't have anywhere else to go, so yes, I meant every word of it. I guess you can call me your tagalong now, because wherever you go, I'm going to be beside you, either watching or helping you in some way or from." She had thought long on this subject. Naruto was some pony she could trust wholeheartedly not to betray her expectations. The Alicorn didn't say anything, and he didn't need to, as the emotions wafted from him was all the answer Chrysalis needed. The next day on the train to Canterlot. "It's nice to be heading back home." He glanced at the two sitting down, Chrysalis gambling with non-existent money as Crescent took the occasional peek at his own pair of cards. They were the only ones heading back to Ponyville. Cadence promised to help treat Saurin and Spitfire's wounds, while Shining Armor watched over them. "Either sit down and join us, or find out where we are," the changeling protested as she laid down a pair of aces, her grin turning sour. crescent holding 3 twos. Gah, you are cheating somehow, I just know it. She didn't even bothering acknowledging the blonde as he sat down next to them, her eyes following the cards as they were magically dealt to each player. You can continue, Chrysalis, I was listening, unlike Naruto over here. Scarlet eyes watched as the Alicorn glanced at them. So as I was saying, Princess Cadence is going to attach my dad's horn so he can use magic once again, though it will be weaker than before, that is what Cadence told me at least. She glanced as the unicorn nodded, the cards face down in front of her. Do you think it could work? The changelings can only view my father as a weakling without his magic. She glanced at the unicorn, his eyes focused on hers, the emotions wafting off him very greatly, almost as if he was trying to toy with her emotions. Your father is in good hooves. If Princess Cadence says she can get him to use magic, then by all means she can get him to use it again. His eyes hardened, daring the former princess to speak up. Have faith in Equestria, Queen Chrysalis, everyone else on this train does. Way in the northern part of Equestria, on top of a snowy mountain. His phthalo blue eyes gazed at the water dripping constantly in his cell. He felt helpless, not being able to manipulate the droplets as they hit the ground. The collar around his horn was secured tightly. With the slightest flicker of magic he'd be powerless. Azure, why don't you talk with me? His guest's purple eyes peering at him, hoping for him to give him the time of day. I mean, has been a real long time since I've been in the presence of a unicorn that could actually kill me if given the chance. Her voice was full of sarcasm, but it was something he'd expected from a pony that hadn't aged a day past 22, yet here she was, the Lily that would never age. What do you want, Lily? You wouldn't kill every pony here if it wasn't important. Her amulet jangled as he turned away. Those purple eyes would be any pony's downfall if they stared at them long enough. The pearl-scent coat shimmered with a beauty that no mare could ever to hope to achieve, and that included the fair princesses of Equestria. Even her mane and tail seemed to fuse with her vibrant coat as the pearl and purple joined to match her coat, and finally those 3 fleurs shined with brilliance, something countless ponies dreamed of having. She was the epitome of beauty and anarchy all rolled into one. I want to free some pony from their confines, and I need the best in Equestria to do it. She glanced at him. It was poetic how the sands of time couldn't falter this stallion. He was truly perfect for this. If anyone could help her cause, he was at the top of her list of unicorns that could get anything done. Flattery isn't going to get you anywhere, Lily. Now you should leave. I can do nothing for you in my current state, nor do I see any reason to help. His eyes hardened as the dripping stopped, the water held in midair, the water taking the small shape of a toothpick. You should know better to use intimidation tactics against me. Something this petty is beneath you. The toothpick flew through the air, it slamming into the collar as the piece of magic and metal hit the ground. If you do me this one small favor, I would be in your debt. He paused as his shackles laid across the ground in front of him. She freed from these bonds so easily and with a shape manipulation spell. Who are you going to free if I say yes? The posing question was all that lingered in his mind. If she needed him, then whoever she had in mind was heavily protected. I want to free my husband, of course. He's been locked away for so long it only seems fitting that he meets this new Alicorn. I see, then I have no objections to this plan after all. It isn't every day I get a chance of revenge against that bastard child and help royalty. So when do we start, Lily Extravacant? I've changed my name, you old mule. It's Fleur now, Fleur de Lis. Her horn glowed with a reddish hue as it enveloped the unicorn, his body slowly regressing to a stallion of her age, the wrinkles disappearing as the mane became a lime green once again. Her head pounded as the flood of voices came back. Tapping into its vast power always had a price. But this seemed unreal. Did this stallion demand so much from it to return to his former glory? She could feel the bile rise in her throat as the magic stopped. The Lula moon that she had met so long ago was back, and she was a step closer to meeting her husband. So what are we going to do now, boss? He would acknowledge her. Those years ago, when they had first met, he held her life in his grasp. Even with that amulet jangling around her neck, he was her superior, and she was nothing but bottom-feeding trash with a knack for illusion and fantasy magic. The years have done well for her. 50 years, and she's now better than me at magic. First, we must go to another country. Another matter demands my attention. Finally, back in Ponyville. The train rolled in the ghost town of Ponyville. It was odd to the Alicorn. It was in the middle of the day, and yet only a single hoof in sight. "Hey Crescent, do you think something would have happened to Ponyville while we were gone?" "I don't think so. Ponyville wouldn't be well standing with every pony here." "It's fear, I can taste it in the air, it's saturated with it actually." Her tongue slowly touching the air. Yeah, this was fear. The horrible bitter taste sent shivers down her spine as she looked on at the two. "Should we go find your friends, Naruto? I'm sure they'd be more than helpful to tell us what's going on." She was right, yet something still felt off. There was no lingering threats of violence, and nothing visible he could see to scare them. "Let's go to Rarity's, maybe she can tell us what's going on. Or we could ask that equestrian what happened to Ponyville?" Her eyes traced the mysterious coated figure in the distance, the sense of adventure brimming in her mind as the thrill from her last escapade with the Alicorn finally wore off. "I guess that could work. Crescent, can you search for where every pony is staying?" The scarlet-eyed unicorn nodded as he took off, the Alicorn smiling at his eagerness to listen to him. Her hoof dragged across the dirt, searching for another ingredient for her next brew. It was a bit frustrating that the town boarded themselves away at the very sight of her, only fillies and the occasional stallion or mare filled with curiosity, yet none never dared to speak to her for so long. It was a lonely life for this zebra, even her homeland seemed better at times. Her turquoise eyes gazed out as three figures walking towards her, one barreled off towards the center of town and the other two steadily approached her, one a changeling and the other an Alicorn. "I hope my eyes are not mistaken, or has the mighty Prince Uzumaki finally awakened?" So the strange pony knew who he was. Well, it wasn't a first, but the prince just wished he could return the favor. "Sorry, I don't know you. Perhaps we can talk about it with my friend Chrysalis, and you could give us some details about what I missed in Ponyville." "My name is Zechariah. Why they hide I still don't know. Perhaps it's because of the mysteries I hold." They blinked at her proclamation, not of concern or worry, just in confusion. "Would you like to join me for a drink? My tea is nice and I can assure my water comes from a clean creek." "I'd love to, Zechariah. Maybe you can answer some things that happened to Ponyville while I was away." He couldn't help but smile, already back and made a new friend. "Oh, make farewell to Las Pegasus." Her eyes glanced out the window as the train began to depart, the fond memories of her home stabbing at her mind as a few tears slowly slid down her muzzle. The two stallions were wonderful enough to give her the space she needed as they boarded the train. She expected her father to come galloping and demanding she stay as the train left, threatening the ponies of Equestria with acts of bravado as she boarded the train, the pair of lovers holding him back as she giggled at his antics. None of that happened for Chrysalis. Instead, it was a lot more emotional than she could ever imagine. The whole swarm gathered around, glancing at her, sending countless into hysterics as her father grinned at her. "Chrysalis, I think you know the rules by now. If you are to disobey orders, then you are to be banished. You're to wander aimlessly through Equestria or the Badlands." The tears slowly dripped to the ground from both sides, each knowing it was for the best as they glanced at each other. "Now get out of my sight and never show your face to any part of the swarm again." The words stung for the first hour as the train left the station. The aroma of concern wafted off the Alicorn, while his companion smelled of affection and compassion, a pair of goggles strapped around his leg. "Be safe, all of you, especially you three." She wouldn't mope on her first step towards freedom. No, she'd embrace this setback, knowing she'd meet them again, banished or not. She was still a changeling, and that was all mattered. "Naruto, Crescent, I'm in your hooves now." Her laugh echoed through the cart as both easily nodded. She wondered what the future entailed for the three of them. Scarlet eyes glanced around as he finally slowed his galloping down to a trot. The constant shift of curtains and doors closing as he walked by only raised his irritation of wondering if the ones he knew were okay. His eyes drifted toward Carousel Boutique, the door open as he slowly walked towards the door, the doors behind him opening in curiosity. Now they care what's going on. His scarlet eyes glanced around the seamstress shop. Countless fabric littered the ground as the vibrant colors were shredded. His little search came up with no results at all. Perhaps it was just the scraps Rarity gave to her little sister. The idea wasn't too far-fetched as the filly from what he knew. "So one dead end. I guess the next stop is Sugarcube Corner then." The stallion regretted saying that as the thought of meeting up with that hyper-pink mare sent shivers down his spine. His hooves slowly moving backwards, not bothering with inspecting the rest of the building as it wasn't his place to go through some pony else's stuff. His hooves trotted through the street as finally Sugarcube Corner came into sight. Dash heard the train pull in. It was a daily ritual for some of the Maras to visit it and look for one of the two stallions that left to go visit Canterlot. She would be the first to admit that she was worried for her friends. Naruto's tone didn't inspire any sort of confidence, as he bought the tickets to make sure the safety of whatever Celestia entrusted him with was upheld. Still, she wasn't as worried as every pony else. She knew Naruto and Crescent would come back, their heads held high as they swapped stories of what happened while they were gone. She would laugh and giggle as Crescent brought up the topic of what transpired over a week ago. They would dance around the subject before either one of them brought it up or they both dropped it altogether. We can't stay huddled in the dark forever, and besides, Twilight's right, we can't just judge this pony because she's different than us. The newest member of Ponyville spoke up, Trixie Lulamoon. Her rage had quelled thanks to the story a certain Pegasus filly told about the mare's selfless actions. The mare had come to be respected throughout Ponyville as tales of her heroism erupted from the gossips, each citizen gaining a sense of admiration for the show mare. She actually apologized for embarrassing her in front of the town. She was accepted without the slightest hesitation. Trixie, do you even know what that evil mare has done? Those are evil eyes, I'm telling you, evil. Pinkie stated, her hooves making wild gestures as the two unicorns rolled their eyes at her wild gestures. Then explain why she looked at us evilly. Maybe she didn't look at us evilly. It could have looked that way because how far away we are from her. The mare was quick to counter, the others begging to her to drop the subject as the two fillies clung to their older sister's coat in fear. I mean, this Zechariah might just need some coaxing, after all, and who better to do it than you, Pinkie? You assisted me in making friends in Ponyville, did you not? Her violet eyes challenged the pink mare to question her logic as almost every pony in here looked away in shame as her point made clear. What about everything else she does? She digs at the ground. How are you going to explain that? The pink mare looked at Trixie. She wouldn't give up, not after she invented such a catchy song after Zechariah. Besides, even you both have to agree she looks suspicious walking through the town covered in that cape. Twilight's voice of reason stopped as she looked over the facts. Sure, this mare did sound suspicious, but it didn't warrant every pony to avoid her like the plague. No, there was something more to this matter. She would stake her horn on it. Her eyes traced the town, the look of surprise etched on her face as she saw a familiar stallion walk towards them. Crescent is coming our way. Her proclamation echoed as her face pressed against the glass. The navy blue-coated stallion brought all the equestrians to the front window as he walked towards the confectionery store slowly. Twilight could practically feel her face fuse with the glass as Rainbow Dash and Trixie pressed into her. We'll ask him then. If Crescent says the mare is creepy, she's creepy, but if he says she isn't, then that settles it. The pink mare clapped her hooves together as the pair of siblings looked on at her in surprise, her hooves already filled with candy and a badminton racket as they all blinked in confusion, wondering where she got it from. What, I eat candy with a paddle? It's to help my badminton. Her eyes rolled as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Crescent's head poked through the door as Violet Eyes smiled at his intrusion. The atmosphere seemed to lighten at the sheer sight of the unicorn. Should have looked here first. Twilight smiled as the unicorn walked in, his eyes settling on Pinkie Pie playing some sort of game with the candy and a badminton racket. I have so many questions to ask you all, and yet the first one I want answered is, what is Pinkie doing with that paddle? Twilight watched as the mare stopped her antics, her eyes turning towards the stallion. It's called candy paddling, a very common thing among us candy eaters. Pinkie smiled as the others glanced towards her, the last bite of candy stuffed in her cheeks as she crunched her teeth. Lovely, now that's settled, can some pony tell me why every pony that I actually know is here in this building? His eyes turned toward the group as the Pinkie Pie swallowed what candy she stored in her mouth, looking at him, her eyes dancing at the thought of explaining to Crescent why they were all here. Fine, Pinkie, please enlighten us to what is going on in Ponyville since we left. You want everything or just what's happening now? I want to know, why are all of you here instead of doing whatever your job in Ponyville? Oh, we are being visited by nasty old Zechariah. Who's that? He could see his younger sister roll her eyes as Pinkie's widened. Perhaps this wasn't his brightest idea so far. You don't know her, okay, let me simplify it for you then. Her breathing slowed to a mellow beat as her eyes glanced back and forth. Zechariah's an evil enchantress, she does evil dances, she'll put you in trank. Her mouth closed at the Lulamoon's siblings shoved their hoof in her mouth. Waft oh foo that or? I have a question for you, Pinky, just one. Have you talked to this evil enchantress, or is this wild speculation? Scarlet eyes glanced at every pony, each looking away, the answer already clear in his mind. How about one of us talk to her, instead of avoiding her like the plague? His eyes dripped in and out between the crowds as the 7 Maras stepped forward, all with a face of indifference. Crescent, you are right, not left or up or down, only right. I mean, it's easy to confuse the two, I do it all the time. Gummy gets on to me about that all the time, but he won't this time, so I will lead the way myself to the Zechariah's hideout, and then you can be the judge of her then. The pink mane deflated a tad as reason echoed through her body. She'd lead the way to the slightly evil Zechariah and prove she wasn't correct in her assumption of the mysterious mare. She could hear them countless hooves galloping behind towards the ever-free forest. With Naruto and Chrysalis. It's been a long time, you know, since any pony has dared ask to visit, especially yourself, Prince. Her turquoise eyes shimmered at the prospect of the company of such an odd couple. Chrysalis kept her eyes on the mysterious mare. The scent wafting off of her was one of a reserved excitement. She could say the same for herself as the stranger led them towards the forest. Do you live somewhere near the end of this town? The mare chuckled softly at her question. As the three walked further towards the forest, the emotions of their escort became muddled as happiness and other emotions clung to the air, confusing the changeling like the unicorn easily did back on the train. No, miss, my home is deep in the forest of Everfree. My visits to Ponyville usually end with me leaving before any pony decided to gather up the courage to talk to me. She smiled, looking back at the duo, her mind wandering towards the knowledge of this Alicorn and changeling. Perhaps they could enlighten her in their fields of knowledge. It's not bad living in the forest, you just need to be wary of the creatures and vegetation, but nothing ever tries to bother me. Is that so? You must be pretty lucky then. I know for a fact that each time I enter the Everfree forest something is going to attack me. Naruto's thoughts turned sour as the last time he came to the forest, the blood dripping from his muzzle as the Ursa Major evaporated into the sky. It was quite a feat defeating such a harrowing monster, Prince Naruto. If it was any other pony, I would imagine the battle would have been more grotesque. Her turquoise eyes didn't bother looking back. His magic filled the air as a towering shadow of what killed the savage beast loomed over her. I don't care what you saw, but don't call it a monster. It was a living being just like you and I. The only difference between us was the mother wanted to continue the fight. He didn't care for the pause of silence from the two females, his magical tail already removing Zechariah's cloak, wondering what she truly looked like, and if she was hiding anything. A quick swipe of his magic and the cloak littered the ground as he got in front of the mare, stopping her advance towards the Everfree forest. Sorry about that, but I'd rather see the face of the pony I'm talking to. His tail whipped back and forth as it faded away into nothing. Chrysalis stared at the revelation. This new equestrian seemed different from the ones she's seen so far. Her coat and mane was a style she had never seen before. Her coat was a light gray covered in darker gray stripes. Her face wasn't exempt from the dark gray either, as it seemed random splotches of it covered her face, even going as far as giving her whisker-like markings. Her mane was a white and dark gray, that also went for her braided tail as well. The mark adorning the stranger's flank, as she came accustomed to seeing, was a spiral-like sun with pointed triangles as the sun's rays. Each step she took a jangle of jewelry would follow, as band of gold decorated her neck, right front hoof and both of her ears. Are you equestrian? Her mouth opened as the thoughtless question came out. No, I am not, Miss Changeling. I am what you might call a zebra, a native to my homeland Africa. Her interest peaked as Zechariah revealed the truth to both of her guests. I didn't mean to shy away from telling the truth, you see, but I would like my past to stay a mystery. Let us continue to the forest. The day is still young and my offer for a cup of tea is still available. Her hooves slowly traveled past the Alicorn. Her journey through the forest had just begun. The sound of branches breaking signified that the two were still following her. She paused at the sight of blue flowers littering the ground. Her hooves trembled at the fact that it was that time of year once again. You beware these flowers, make sure none brush against you. These flowers are cruel tricksters that will cause much grief. She slowly circled around the poison joke patch, each flower powdered in blue pollen as her hooves slowly moved through the clearing. The sound of countless branches breaking as 8 equestrians walked forward into the blue patch of flowers. "See, I told you she's evil. Look at what she's doing to Naruto, and she's got a minion helping her," Pinkie Pie shouted as pollen rose from the air clinging to her frame as each mare nodded in agreement. "What is that thing, Zechariah, and what are you going to do with Naruto?" She didn't bother glancing towards the Alicorn who walked through the flower patch. "Zechariah, I need to talk with my friends first. I'll have that cup of tea some other time." His cerulean eyes glanced at the zebra as his hooves covered in pollen, wondering how he was going to break the news that he brought home a friend to stay with him. "I guess this should be a good time to introduce you to my new friend, Chrysalis of the Changelings." He gauged the eyes of each mare, all staring in interest at the oddity that Chrysalis was. The fear disappeared from most of their eyes as curiosity replaced it instantly. "Let's go back to Ponyville and we can properly introduce her to every pony." His hooves moved as the changeling's wings flapped, carrying herself over the flower patch, the only one untouched by the cruel flower known as poison joke. Derpy's house. Tangelo's eyes blinked in confusion as Lyra stared at this oddly colored lizard that somehow Derpy brought home. It was a bright pink with a rainbow of dots covering its body. The creature looked harmless enough to the unicorn, even with Derpy trying to poke it with her mail bag, but the sense of fear for the unknown was still there. "So it's a lizard, right? Or is this one of those things that we should go read about it in a book?" The creature tilted its head as she approached it closer, its mouth opening as its tongue shot out like a lightning bolt. The moment of fright passed as she gazed at the strange creature's tongue. Even with its lightning-fast movement, it had only managed to shoot out 4 inches, and from the looks of things the poor creature couldn't retract its tongue as quickly as it shot forth. "I think it's harmless, or just lazy. Still, don't touch it, you two." "Why not? It looks harmless, and that tongue is already out. Nothing could go wrong," the Earth Pony said as she chewed a piece of gum, her eyes going over the strange creature as its tongue still remained on the ground. "If it wasn't breathing now, I tell you it was dead," her hoofs slowly reaching towards the creature's back. "Don't touch it, Bonbon, I'm serious, we don't know what it is." Her cries fell on deaf ears as the hoof brushed against the creature's back. "See, nothing to worry about." Her hoof raised in the air, the pink lizard hanging deftly in the air. The cries of fright only startled the 3 mares as orange goop shot out from its mouth, covering the ground and 2 of the 3 mares. Derpy looked on, wondering what to make of the orange goop covering Lyra and Bonbon. The minty mare slowly removed the oddity with a tug of magic, dropping it to the ground. It crawled into her mail bag, probably nestling in the safety of such a dark place. "We gotta take it to Twilight post-haste." The 2 blinked as she laughed at her own mail pun, only getting a growl of frustration from the 2. "What can Twilight do that I can't? What can any pony do that I can't? You want us to tell you or write you a list, or tell you some good things that you can do that they can't?" Bonbon spoke up as she changed her glances between the mail bag and Lyra. "Oh, let's start with the fact that our resident wallflower chewed out a dragon, or maybe that our resident rainbow-haired nuisance verbally beat down a griffin. And don't forget to mention the fact that the one stallion that has done more than you could ever hope to achieve in your life works for the Alicorn that you crush on, and killed the Ursa Minor attacking Ponyville. That's just the recent things too. I can go on about your failing music career, perhaps mention what a waste of space that harp is, since all you ever do is tune it." Bonbon grinned as the unicorn snarled at her. "I guess you do have a point, but it must be awful living in every pony else's shadow." Tangelo's eyes turned away as she heard Bonbon's breathing hitch. "She's hit home with that one. I mean, you come from a successful family, and everything was handed to you on a silver platter, but you squandered it all. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if my failings were most likely caused by you as a tagalong, not to mention that you are crushing on Naruto's tagalong, how pathetic is that? So I suggest you leave now, or this finely tuned harp will need to be polished again." Her gaze turned towards Derpy, holding the mail bag close to her chest as if it was her last defense against Lyra's verbal lashing, Bonbon leaving the alone as she dragged a bag of bits with her. Derpy left as soon as Lyra's horns started glowing. She needed to find Twilight or somebody smart. This wasn't right, or even possible. They were just joking around a few minutes ago. Why was all this anger in her house? Her tears flowed freely as she hugged her source of happiness, once more getting a squeal of pain from the lizard inside. The bag grew heavier as she looked on through the town, wondering where Twilight could be. Chrysalis blinked as the group of Maras and stallions gathered in Naruto's house, the sound of running water coming from the bathroom as they all stared at each other. The smell of hesitation and curiosity wafted off all of them as she tasted the air around her. So you Maras are all of Naruto's close friends. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Her hoof reached towards the group of ponies as the first to grab was an azure-coated mare. The curiosity clung to her body like it was a minute-old perfume. Trixie, and it is a pleasure to meet you. Her eyes scanned over the changeling in curiosity, her eyes slipping towards Naruto for a brief few seconds as he smiled in approval. Is it true that you are a princess, Miss Chrysalis? Oh no, I was a queen. I gave it all up a day or two ago. The changelings had different goals than I did, and I'd never be free with them, so I gave my crown to a leader that will hopefully lead them down a peaceful path. The hesitation left each one as they all stepped forward with a different look in their eyes and a different smell wafting off of them. So darling, what made you quit? Not enough colts in your life, or was it dull? Rarity's was the first to speak up as her eyes casually traced over the body of the former queen. No, most of the ones that tried something usually got beaten to a pulp by my father or were too brutish to hold a conversation, so they left the hive with his blessings and looked for another mate, one preferably in Equestria. She stared at the others as a smile graced her lips. I mean, some of the changelings live a life of solitude, only venturing out into the sun for necessity, while others become famous and revel in the atmosphere of those around them, or at least that's what my father said. Her eyes drifted towards the cyan Pegasus, who slowly backed away from her. Not the smell of fright but anticipation lingered off the mare. Harlequin eyes followed the mare as she traveled to the navy blue-coated unicorn. The Took looked at each other and smiled as they left them all silently. So the lack of decent suitors made you give up your throne then? Couldn't you have widened your scope then? No, you don't get it, white mare. I had little interest in suitors to begin with. What I wanted more than anything was to see Equestria, and all types of places across the world. Las Pegasus was the very first place I visited besides the rocky desert in the Badlands, and with that one taste of freedom, I knew I wanted more, so here I am. She watched as the curiosity began to fade from each of the 6 mares as they finally began to smile honestly back at her. Though I have to thank every pony that helped make this happen, especially Naruto, I will be forever in his debt. She didn't snicker as jealousy reeked the air. She didn't even need to smell it. 2 Maras looked at her with such intensity. Can you tell Trixie what he did to get such adulation from you? Her grayish-violet eyes glared at Chrysalis. She wondered what sort of deed did the Naruto do to gain the queen's affections. Oh, he saved me from the swarm's mortal enemy, so I owe him a massive debt of gratitude that I could never hope to repay. Her slit tongue flicked in the air as the sentiment of empathy emanated off every pony here. Now can you please introduce yourselves? I'd like to become friends with the ones Naruto holds so dear to his heart. Her eyes turned towards the lavender mare walking forward as she smiled at her. Please let me introduce every pony. Chrysalis. My name is Twilight Sparkle and this is Fluttershy, Applejack, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Trixie, and wait, Rainbow Dash is missing. I'm sure she was here just a second ago. Violet eyes looked around the spacious house as she looked back at the one that should be demanding her attention. I'm sorry, I can't find her anywhere. She probably left to do something with the weather. No, she left a minute or two ago with Crescent. They seemed happy and I'm sure we'd meet again if those looks were anything to go on. They all gazed at her, each wondering something else. The changeling was sure of the water finally coming to a stop as the bathroom door opened, her gaze averting as the door slowly creaked open. Naruto glanced as he walked out the bathroom door, towel wrapped around his frame, as every followed each step he took. It isn't polite to stare. The drips of water dropped to the wooden floor, his coat matted down with water, and his hair lost its spikes as he glanced at them all. Come on, are you girls going to watch me walk towards my room? He almost tripped as 3 of them nodded to him, the rest complying with his simple demands. Be back in a bit. Maybe we can get something afterwards, so none of you go anywhere. He walked as quickly to his room as possible, the door shutting behind as the Maras finally gained some semblance. The Maras did nothing as they waited for him to walk out, the thought of food and catching up with the Alicorn on what he missed at the front of 2 minds. The minutes passed in silence as the door finally began to open, All set of eyes were on the Alicorn as he walked towards them all, the front of his mane still dripping wet as he grinned at them all. So where are we going to eat? Here, Trixie can cook something here. She ignored every set of eyes settled on her but Naruto's. She chose to stay here and she wouldn't back down to no pony or thing that wanted his affections. I mean, if it's alright with you, I can make us some sandwiches and we swap stories of how our week was. She watched as the cerulean eyes thought in concentration as every pony else looked at her curiously. I don't think we have any food here, Trixie. We do, Naruto. While you two were away, Trixie has personally stocked the refrigerator and cupboard. It's going to be a while before we run out of edible food with Trixie staying here. If it's alright with you, that is? She wondered if the prince knew about her brother's arrangement for her to live with them. He blinked at her. He honestly didn't know what to say to that. His bodyguard and friend invited his sister to live with him for the time being. Naruto glanced at every pony else wondering what he should say about this subject. Yeah, of course you can stay. It would be wonderful to have someone cook in the house. He grinned as the thought of the two siblings bonding echoed through his mind. This was the right choice, and besides he would love to see more of Trixie's magic. Trixie shall get to it right away then, Pinkie Pie. Trixie's talents aren't suited towards confections. Might you assist Trixie in that matter? Her eyes turned toward the mare. She took her brother's words to heart. She would ask for help if it was beyond her ability, and cooking any confection definitely was. She could cook vegetation like it was Napani's business. She lived on her for 3 years. Confectionaries were a different story, and if she was going to win Naruto's heart, she'd use a shortcut through his stomach, even if it required some assistance. Oh, and please ask for seconds. I'd be willing to make it for every pony here. She smiled at the group. She followed his slow canter through town. His silence did nothing but build up the anticipation between the two. So was it cool going on your little adventure with Naruto? She smiled as scarlet eyes turned her way, his head motioning to a table where the two could sit and chat. Don't be all mysterious with me now. It's called a conversation we are having, so that means talk. His head still motioned towards the table. Reluctantly she sat down as the stallion sat across from her. Okay, now that we're sitting, please tell me what happened. You did say Wonderbolt, and that means something cool happened. He smiled at the pair of magenta eyes pleading with him. It was a small victory for him if she was curious, and all he needed to say was one word: Wonderbolt. That queen back in Naruto's house was the reason we had to leave so urgently. I'm going to skip the boring parts if you don't mind. She eagerly nodded as he told her their journey with the changelings. So yeah, about the last day was me spending time with the Wonderbolts in the recovery room. Saurin's going to out for a while, but he should be flying sometime next year if everything is alright. He watched those eyes brighten as he finally stopped talking. Her front hooves trembled occasionally as he said both Saurin and Spitfire's names so casually. So you got to hang with the Wonderbolts all day, and you did nothing but listen to them. Her hooves shook more as he slowly nodded his head. A wasted opportunity. Seriously, she'd give her front hooves to spend quality with her idols, and all he did was listen to them. Did you at least ask them some questions like how many spins they can do with a front flip loop? She watched as he turned away, his face still in a frown. What about any of their other tricks? Did you ask about those? I didn't too actually. We talked about what it's like to fly, the touring, all that simple stuff. So nothing about getting me an audition? No, they didn't even mention you. What about you? Did you mention me at all? Her hooves pressed against her face as glanced at him. I did mention you to them. I don't know how they felt, but they didn't seem angry listening to me talk about you. So how was your week in Ponyville? A horrible. An old friend came to town and she treated every pony as though they weren't worth her time because they were uncool. I never noticed it, and when she finally did show her true colors, she just ridiculed everyone and mocked them for not being cool. Her eyes watched as he nodded to her, his eyes elsewhere lost in the glass of the cafe. You aren't even listening to me, are you? I was actually. I'm just wondering what you said to your friend. So what do you think I said? Buck off. No, I couldn't ever say that to Gilda. We go way back. I just told her that if she couldn't accept my friends for the way they are, maybe we shouldn't see each other anymore. If she changes her ways, would you want to be friends again? Of course, I'd love to be friends with Gilda again. So did anything else happen while we were gone? We had a dragon living on top of the mountains and Fluttershy handled it. His scarlet eyes turned towards Rainbow Dash as the mere mention of Fluttershy handling a dragon, the thought of that ever happening was hilarious to him. So who beat the savage beast? Was it Twilight Applejack or was it you that was triumphant against it? Her head shook rapidly, giving him a silent no, as her eyes seemed to harden at the fact he thought she was lying to him. You're serious? Fluttershy beat a dragon? Her head slowly nodded, never breaking eye contact with him. What did she do? Politely ask it to leave? She actually chewed him out and got him to leave, but yes, she did it all. I have to give the mare credit then. If she can whip a dragon into shape, then any pony should consider her a counselor, I guess. He watched as she looked away, her hooves outstretched across the table. Derpy's coming this way. Her eyes watched as the gray mare carefully flew towards them, her mail bag strap placed in her teeth, her front left hoof weighing at the cyan Pegasus as the bag dropped from her mouth. Derpy watched bag plummet to the ground, the lizard still in it, an internal debate for the safety of the poor creature and the grief. Her bag stopped in midair, surrounded by a sunny glow. Golden eyes drifted to the unicorn, now deep in concentration, as the bag was set gently on Rainbow Dash's table. Thank you, Cardi. The bag's very important to me and everything in it too. The two could help her with this strange creature, she just knew it. Her hooves touched the ground as both looked on in surprise, the creature jostling inside the bag as brown ooze escaped through the zipper. What in the name of Luna is in that bag? His voice raised as the bag jostled more. With each movement it made more brown ooze came out of it. He needed to know what was in this bag. Staring at this brown goop just irritated him more with each passing second, his eyes glancing upwards at Rainbow Dash. Everything washed away, the anger, fear, everything just disappeared, only leaving a feeling of contentment. His horn glowed with a bright sunny hue that wrapped around the zipper. I really don't know what it is, it looks like a lizard though. The strabismus-ridden mare glanced at the bag and one of her closest friends separately. Anticipation was written the only that was on Dash's face as they stared at the unicorn. Each sound of the teeth separating brought more worry as doughy white eyes looked out from the bag. A bright pink tongue shot out, startling no pony unlike his previous time, its body sloshing around in the brown goop as one of its legs finally grasped the outer lining of the bag. So this is what was in the bag. Kind of ugly if you asked me. Her hoof touching the brown ooze, her eyes dilating at the briefest touch of it. Fear poured over her, each one fighting for dominance. As the bow rose in her stomach, she could feel her throat tightening as it became harder to breathe. Her wings sporadically flapping as she glanced at Crescent. She couldn't breathe now, and she didn't know why or how. Am I going to die? It was the only thought going through her head as she banged her hooves against the table, the goop landing on the both of them as scarlet eyes stared at her, a tinge of affection reflected in his eyes, the threat of death the farthest thing away from her mind now, smiling back at him. The unseen noose around her neck loosening, the flailing stopped as her chest heaved once more. The danger had passed, and now her hooves missing the brown goop and all that near her gone as well. He felt something as the goop landed on him. He wasn't sure what it was. It could have been dread or fear as he stared at the pink creature emerging from the mail bag. His heart beating faster each second he stared at it, the pain in his chest increasing didn't scare him. He practically died in Las Pegasus. This was just something that couldn't be helped. His eyes drifted towards the cyan Pegasus. He didn't want to die in front of her or any pony in general. Rainbow Dash was one of the ones that he couldn't die in front of. No, he'd look into her eyes and hopefully she'd understand where she stood with him. The pain didn't stop, it only decreased as he looked at her, his heart rate slowing down dramatically as they shared that moment. His scarlet eyes tracing the table in embarrassment from the smile she gave him. His concentration turned towards the goop disappearing. It was fast with a crackle and poof. A second later nothing was there. What in Luna happened just now? His eyes settling back on the creature in fascination. Derpy didn't know what to make of the emotions that washed over her. It was overpowering for the very first second, and then it died as golden eyes trained on the one thing she appreciated more than anything she had. No muffins could top the sense of happiness she got from staring at her mail bag. The voices of emotions washed away as nothing but happiness filled her mind. The brown goop-looking soup might have decorated the table a few seconds ago, but now it was as spotless as it ever was. Even her bag didn't have a speck of it from what she could see with her good eye. The lizard scattered around the table as it avoided the sets of hooves trying to corral it back into the bag. A sunny glow wrapped around its torso, legs flailing in the air as it was swiftly set back into its makeshift prison. So any idea of what it is, Cardi? My name is Derpy, and no, I don't have any clue what this thing is. His eyes glanced at the bag and then towards Amares. He knew that brown ooze that the lizard shot out brought out those emotions, and almost ended his life in the process. We should go find Naruto. Chrysalis or Twilight should know what this thing is. He gazed at the bag once more. It would be easier to kill the creature here and now. The thought was tempting, but he couldn't risk not knowing what could happen if he slew the beast. I'll carry it then, Crescent. I brought it to you, also it's my responsibility. Her eye darted between both of them. As the other eye gazed lazily at the cloud, it was such a beautiful day. The dull thump of both ponies alerted her. As they both slept on the table, spots of navy blue covered the cyan Pegasus, the Mars left golden eye traced over the stallion. White spots covered his body as they both lay there unconscious. She didn't reach towards them as the constant reminder of the goop and what it did to her. She would sit here with the two until they awoke, then she'd go to Twilight with whatever this was. Zechariah glanced at the inside of her hut, countless flowers and possessions from the homeland. She watched the foolish Alicorn step into the poison joke, knowing full well of the dangers that it was going to cause. At least the changeling was smart about it. It happened again, this time more subtly than the last. Her thoughts went back to her first willing guests in a long time. She felt the need to help him to return the generosity he showed defending her honor as a shaman. She wondered how the two would react to her witch-like cauldron and the potions she brew in it. I'll return that selfless act with a favor of my own. Perhaps he doesn't know of the cure for poison joke. Her mind reeled as she glanced over her ingredients. One crucial component's missing, the extract of a manticore root. The forest of Everfree was kind to her, letting such a dangerous tree's roots grow in Ponyville only helped her cause in extracting such a valuable ingredient for all of her potions. She'd have to make another trip to Ponyville, most likely under the guise of night if she wanted to get anything truly done. Today they all have to bear this burden. I hope that they all behave and are safe for the night. Her light azure hooves trampled the ground of an empty Ponyville. Cyan eyes looked on at the empty building as her hooves stopped in front of a small violet Pegasus mare. Her eyes settled on the Alicorn laying next to her. His blonde spiked hair was all matted. Her hoof gently brushed his fallen form as he coughed up blood. Naruto, what did thou do to him? Her body galloped as she finally approached the pair. The violet mare's attention never waned from the Alicorn even as Princess Luna stood before her daunting over diminutive frame. What hast thou done to my confidant and great friend Naruto? And how are you here in the first place? This is a realm of dreams. I am the only capable of entering. Her eyes watched as the stranger's left hoof gently touched the ground, the wings stretching on her back, an immediate sign she was about to take off. It is finally nice to meet you, Princess Luna, or should I call you Nightmare Moon? Her vermilion eyes still tracing the Alicorn's body as it convulsed for a second, both mares releasing a hell breath as he stopped and began breathing normally again. Whatever that flower was, it is a doozy. She joked about his condition. It was the only way she knew how to cope with this ordeal. It wasn't like she could help strengthen his immune system and counteract whatever this flower caused. This was going to be a battle of time and a testament to Naruto's willpower. The Kyuubi's magic now was the cause of his pain, instead of being that always ever-burning boost of energy that he had. Every attempt to siphon off the magic only created a new gap for it to leak through his body. I'm going to have to cut off your magic if it keeps up like this. Naruto's lack of progress in obtaining the fox's tails of magic was a true blessing in disguise. If he had another tail of magic, she was sure she'd meet death once again. Princess Luna was already on edge when the mare called he by her alter ego. She could name the number of ponies that would call her that to her face with 2 hooves. Those eyes held no mercy or fear to her presence. In fact, it seemed she had the "What did you do to him, and who are you?" The irritation rose as she started walking away from the Naruto's body. As Princess of Canterlot and co-ruler of Equestria, I demand that you answer me. Her cyan eyes trained on the Pegasus as stopped. A sneeze of dread washed over her as turned towards her. I didn't do anything to him, and if you order me to do something again, I'll hurt you. Only one pony orders me around, and he's fighting an internal battle now. Do you understand, or do I have to beat that into you like Naruto snapped you out fo your funk when you were Nightmare Moon? She could see the anger brimming in the 1,000-year-old mare's eyes, and with a coughing fit from her friend snapped both out of their initial stare down. Then let thine self try another way. She watched the crimson eyes watch as she approached her. Luna's head and body lowered to the mystery mare's hooves, tears dropping from her cyan eyes as she gazed at the ground beneath the hooves. Please tell me everything, thou owes Naruto everything, and if I can repay him in any way then please let me assist. She didn't look up this mare, she knew something about what was going on. Senna glanced at the Alicorn. Royalty was begging and crying at her hooves for her to help her. The one that caused her to lose that carefree attitude was standing before her. Princess Luna mutilated Naruto, and yet here she was begging to help save him. Please get up, watching you bow to me is boring. Let's talk over tea, and if you're lucky enough I'll tell you the truth. Her hooves clapped together as a dining table appeared out of nowhere. She could imagine the confused look on Luna's face when she looked up at what she just did. I have a question though, how did you know Naruto wasn't conscious? Her hooves clapped together as a teapot and set of cups on opposite sides of the table. She sat down in a chair waiting for her guest to graciously accompany her. Don't speak in the royal Canterlot voice either. The moon mare slowly rose from the ground, her eyes still running with tears as she looked at the simple dining set that wasn't there before. I know when all ponies are asleep, if you did not know. 9 equestrians collapsed at the same time here in Ponyville and Naruto is one of them. So I checked up on his well-being and here I am. It felt weird dropping the royal Canterlot dialect as she stared at her newest company. Now please tell me what's going on with Naruto and who are you? One thing at a time, my name is Senna Ube. I guess the head's a little foggy on the last name now. I am his guardian Pegasus. And now that introduction is out of the, please have some tea with me. She smiled a fox-like grin, a single canine poking out as she looked at the moon mare, wondering how she was going to take the truth about Naruto. Drip, drip, drip. His eyes scanned the area. It was all the same. Some pipes littered the ground and water at his ankles, and that drip, it was so annoying. Celestia, I hate this. The Alicorn trotted slowly through the tunnel-like hallway, the scenery never changing as he walked what was probably 5 minutes yet it felt like 10 hours. His hooves stopped as he felt the water rose. Memories of what happened just minutes ago came flooding back to him as he cried out in pain. His previous memories were those of laughing with Chrysalis, Rarity, and the others as Trixie came out with daisy sandwiches. Her eyes were always trained on him, accompanied with a smile he'd seen before. That smile was the same one Luna gave him as they talked to each other. I wonder if Crescent knows. Nah, he would have said something on the train on the way there. Thoughts of the three with plagued his mind as the coppery taste of blood flooded his mouth. The pain in his chest tightened as he craved to see those smiling faces once again. No, not here. I'll see them again, damn it. His hooves protested as he sloshed through the mucky water once again. Each muscle felt on fire as he headed on down the hallway. Another 5 minutes passed. With each step he took, the darker it got, and the darker it was, the more his chest tightened. A few more steps. Come on, I can do it. He felt his body collapse, plunging head first into the filth-ridden water. His head thrashed in the water as he pulled free from the watery grave. Cerulean eyes set ablaze at the vast opening before him. Well, this is a dead end. His body refused to budge as he looked behind him, wondering which way he would have to venture to get out of this sewer. It's been a while, whelp. Ruby eyes watched as he turned towards him, those cerulean eyes covered in fear, his body trembling from the sheer presence of his power. He watched a pair of ruby-red orbs looking at him, cat-like irises decorated each eye as stared at him. Man, it's cold in here. You got anything over there to dry me off? He watched as the ruby orb's brightness increased, whatever the owner of the pair letting out a growl of irritation. You dare mock me, the most powerful being in the universe? I don't know who you are. Besides, I'm not mocking you. I'm trying to get out of here and return to my friends. A malicious chuckle filled the empty room, red light filling the air as a large paw came into the light. Do you fear me now, fool? He watched those cerulean eyes gaze curiously. Naruto had no fear of him, or the malevolent power that seeped from him. No, not really. The paw's kind of big, but I've seen bigger. It isn't like you can do anything behind those bars. Naruto knew something was up as the beast's paw slunk back into the shadows. The magic wafting off of the beast was incredible. Even the brief show of power by Celestia couldn't compare to this. You impudent child, the fact that you're alive is due to my mercy. Do not go seeking a swift death. His aura lighting the room, casting out every shred of darkness in the room. His body in full view as the Alicorn shivered to himself. The bars were the only thing holding Kurama back from ripping this insignificant pest into bloody pieces. Okay, Fox, I'm sorry for offending you. I was just trying to make conversation with you and it happened to backfire, okay? His eyes gazed at the bars holding the beast back. Realization dawned on the blonde as where he had seen the creature before. You are the fox on that door, aren't you? I have a name, you know, and you must call me Kyubi. Naruto paused. He was sure Senna called it something similar to that name. Then can I ask you a question, Kyubi? His voice faltered the slightest as he saw the three black tails moving to some rhythm the blonde was sure he could never hope to mimic. Why are you alive? I mean, you're my magic. It paused. His breath became shallower as the thought of Naruto unknown to his presence. The very idea brought a grin to his face, and now here Naruto was asking questions like some brat in class. You are gazing at the potential of what you could become, Uzumaki. That power that you felt from me is what you want to obtain with the right push. What's the right push then? This power, if he could use it, there wouldn't be any need for him to worry about not being strong enough to protect those precious to him, while stopping those that threaten them without killing them. It's easy. Drop your pacifistic views and kill everything that opposes you. If they dishonor you, rip their throats out with your bare teeth and let the rest know what happens when they deny you what they seek. The fox reveled in that look of horror he gave, the small satisfaction of sickening this intolerable foe. Those eyes, how he hated seeing them every time he appeared in front of him during his previous life. They always held a tinge of fear and anger, but never respect for what the fox was capable of. Now they held nothing but determination and a pacifistic view on life. I can't do that. I'm not going to become some killing machine, and the sheer though of that just makes me want to vomit. So I'll just pass, before you say anything else. He didn't want whatever this fox was offering if it meant killing to achieve his goals. I have one last question. You are the one that is making Senna hostile, aren't you? The cold chuckle echoed through the room as both sets of eyes hardened on one another. I'll tell you everything, Uzumaki, if you release me from my cag. His blood dripped to the ground as a set of chains wrapped tighter around him. Of course the bastards would have a fail-safe to stop any plans to escape. They always did before, and with her as his watchdog he'd have to find a better way to coax the brat. Fucking bitch, of course she'd watch us even if meant straining her magic. Just go back the way you came, Naruto. Some pony is waiting to speak with you. His eyes glanced around as the soft voice disappeared. The blood dripping from the fox's paw stopped as it healed itself. The vulpine beast growled as he slowly backed away, heeding the strange voice's words of wisdom. It was nice meeting you, Kyubi, but I think our goals aren't the same, so I'll just listen to the spooky voice. He didn't bother looking back at the monstrously large vulpine. He could hear the paws scrapping across the bars of his jail, not realizing the pain that plagued his body a few minutes ago disappeared like it never occurred at all. I can't wait to see that hope and honesty disappear from your eyes, Uzumaki, because when that happens I'll be sure to remind you of that horse shit you spewed moments ago. The fox watched as Naruto trotted away, disappearing altogether once he passed through the way he entered. I'm going to kill all three of you and nothing is going to stand in my brats. So what does a guardian Pegasus do? Her cyan eyes traced the violet mare as she sipped her tea in comfort. Crimson eyes glanced at her, the teacup gently set down on the table. I do lots of things actually. I give him insight to the battles he faces. Though if you must know, I told him to kill you and forget the foolish notion of saving you. She glanced at the princess of the night, wondering if her prodding was enough for her to see some real retaliation. I regulate his amount of magic that he can use at the moment, as well. Cyan eyes gazed at her curiously as the very thought of controlling his magic seemed preposterous. Even the Pegasus knew it seemed far-fetched, but she was maintaining it after all. That's not possible. If what you are saying is true, then you are nothing but a manifestation of him, yet you act nothing like him. There was something wrong with this. No pony should ever need some pony else to regulate their magic. Sure, Naruto's outburst was startling when he held her alter ego, but he seemed in control at the time. You lie. Naruto has great control over his magic and has made leaps and bounds with each day's passing. Good point. I'm not anything like Naruto. He's cute in the naive sort of way. I'm more of the type to have a fun party with, or the mare that will slit your throat if you buck with me, depending on the circumstance, of course. Luna's look of disgust didn't bother her. If the princess had any qualms with her outlook on things, she'd have done it by now. So you don't believe the magic part, huh? Okay, then what would you compare his magic to the sheer size of, I mean? Her thoughts turned toward the Alicorn resting beside her hooves. His display of magic that day was extraordinary, but since then it seemed a much tamer version. All the power he held seemed to have faded away, almost as if he had regressed even. It's not possible, you can't possibly mean. Now you get what I'm saying. When he battled you he was much stronger at the time, now he seems about half of that now, doesn't he? I just thought he was reserving himself. Naruto, I love him to death, but he's an idiot, and couldn't hold himself back even if he wanted to, so no, he isn't reserving himself. Her eyes watched as the moon mare began to rationalize this revelation. So you are a real pony, a citizen of Equestria? I am real. If you plunged that horn into my heart right now, I'd die and you'd probably kill Naruto and release his magic in the process. But that's ultimately up to you to decide. I'm not a citizen of Equestria. The scenery is lovely, but the only home I've ever had is here inside Naruto's mind. How? When Naruto was born, his father knew of the immense power he held. Even as a foal, he dwarfed his own magical energy. He didn't believe it was possible at first, but the more time he had, the more he realized how dangerous his son was with one outburst of magic, so he made the ultimate sacrifice. His father sacrificed his life to create me, a regulator for Naruto. It was his last spell, you know, and I thank him for it every day. Her vermilion eyes glanced towards Naruto's frame. It was a half-truth. The mare knew it, but she'd do anything to protect him, even if it was putting on the largest charade she had ever conceived. I view the stallion as a brother and son. I'll be here when he figures out what he wants here in Equestria, and when this Alicorn won't need me one day, and when that happens I'll fade away happy knowing he's in wonderful hooves. She drank her tea in tranquility as the day of Naruto. Cyan eyes darted away as a lone tear slowly dropped onto her hoof as she looked back at the suffering mare. I see, so you only want Naruto to live a productive life, but why hasn't he appeared sooner in Equestria? I'm sure Celestia would have loved the company. No, you're mistaken if you thought that he would have turned out the way he did. His mother knew better, raising him alone, letting him learn every single thing that he has through either an outdated book or an unconventional lesson. If he was brought to Canterlot to be raised and brought up, he'd be influenced by other ponies. She wanted him to be his own stallion, so she taught him everything she knew as an earth pony. She died when he turned 18, and you should know the rest by now. Crimson eyes turned toward the blonde. Whatever set his magical energy out of whack dissipated as he slowly rose from the ground. Now that's settled, I think you should speak with him, unless of course you would like to discuss his life some more? The Alicorn paused at the offer she was given. To her it was a no-brainer, as the Alicorn stirring beside her took priority over initial concerns. My choice is either I just wanted to check up on him and make sure he was alright, so I should leave soon after a few words with Naruto. Senna, I hope to speak with you again very soon. I'm sure you have as many questions for me as I do for you. She watched as the mare stood up and smiled at her, wondering what exactly she was up to. Then meet me here in 3 weeks from now. You can use his dreams as a way to reach me. I actually have many questions, Luna, for you, and I know you are the only one that can answer them. Oh, and tell Naruto not to panic when he wakes up. Luna watched as the mare's hooves clacked together one more time, her body shimmering out of existence this time. Thoughts of the questions the odd Pegasus would ask lingered for seconds as orange enveloped her sight, hooves wrapping around her neck. Naruto, are you all right? A blush grew across her cheeks as he hugged her tighter than he had any time previously, even in his dreams. I'm fine, I couldn't be better right now. His hooves slowly pulling away as the thought of seeing the mare in such a long time warmed his heart, especially after the encounter with the Kyuubi. A familiar face was definitely what he needed now. You know, I was wondering if you were going to visit my dreams while I was in the Badlands. My range doesn't extend that far, Naruto. And besides, I'm sure yours dreams were much more tame than the one you had in Ponyville. Her mane brushed against his face as he pulled away, finally the two meeting eyes again. I hope my advice at least did that much, Naruto. I care for you, and every pony you meet, I know, shares that same feeling. She ignored the protests of the Alicorn as his heart seemed lighter by just looking at her. Naruto, our visit must be cut short. I have some things I need to do in Canterlot. Wait, before you go, can I ask you something, Luna? The mare paused as she smiled at the Alicorn, shuffling his hooves back and forth. Of course you can. Anything of me, Naruto. We are more than friends, right? Of course, so come to Ponyville, okay, sometime next week if you've got some free time. He paused as that, yet it was about time for another date with Luna, and he'd ask her something as every mare that he knew came to mind, especially 3. Next Thursday would be best for me, Naruto, and I'd love to come visit Ponyville. Maybe this time we can see the sights instead of disturbing the nightlife of Canterlot. The playfulness erupted across her face as the meeting in 9 days away laid fresh in their minds. Oh, and a friend told me that when you wake, don't panic. Her body finally disappeared, leaving a confused Alicorn in her wake. Grayish-violet eyes were the first open as the thought of what just happened echoed through her mind. The clock read 4:37 p.m. Trixie didn't care that she'd passed out for over a half an hour or that there was a dragon in front of her face waving his short, stumpy claws in front of her face. All she wanted to do at this moment was sleep this nasty headache away and then try to woo Naruto with some more of her cooking. Trixie, get up, you won't believe what happened. Her eyes followed the purple dragon as he jumped up and down, practically demanding her attention. If it isn't something amazing, Spike, Trixie is going to be very frustrated with you. You should first look in a mirror before you go look at the others. The dragon giggled to himself, covering his mouth with one of his claws, finding the situation hilarious. The mare's one horn glowed with a bright pink for a second as a proof of magic and a vase of flowers. Another flash of magic as a bowling ball slammed in at the dragon's gut, sending him crashing into a wall. Sorry, Spike, the first one was supposed to be a mirror, but Trixie summoned a vase instead for some reason. She could imagine the dragon pulling himself comically from the wall. Her hooves pushed herself on the ground, her mind already going towards the bathroom mirror. Her eyes settling on the 3 horns on her forehead now. All 3 were covered in splotches of blue spots as if it was some epidemic. What in the name of Celestia is on my head? Her irritation grew as her left hoof slowly poked each horn, all 3 moving and reacting to the slightest stimuli. This is bad. No, bad doesn't even begin to describe what this is. Her hooves pounded against the bathroom sink. The very thought of looking like this for the rest of her life repulsed the showmare. See, I told you, look ridiculous. The dragon's voice called out. A twinge of exhaustion could be heard in his voice's tone. You shouldn't feel too bad though, every pony else is in the same boat as you. His eyes looking at the mare, thankfully she was awake, unlike Twilight or any other pony here. Chrysalis left almost instantly after the splotches appeared. It was awfully shady of Chrysalis to leave when every pony was unconscious, especially changed into Twilight. His pistachio eyes glanced back at Twilight, hoping she'd get up soon as possible and calm his nerves, as the showmare did nothing to calm the uneasiness he felt. So where is every pony else, or is Trixie the only one up? Her hoofs still preoccupied with her newest growths on her forehead. As her eyes stealthily glanced into the living room, the snores of one Twilight Sparkle made her ponder how she slept through such atrocious sounds. The mare's horn hung limp and covered in blue splotches as her own set of horns were, so it wasn't an isolated thing. This relived her much more than any words of comfort could ever hope to carry out. Her mind finally at rest with her current situation, the yawn of a feminine tone she hadn't heard before reached her ears. Who's there? Trixie is no stranger to violence, so if you leave now, Trixie will find it within her heart to forgive her transgressions. Her head slowly peeked out from the door of the room, absent the newest house guest, Chrysalis. Rarity looked a mess with her coat. Countless strands of white covered her body, and her mane and tail an absolutely mess. Applejack looked well normal if you didn't count the fact that her body was shrunken to the size of a leaf, and Pinkie Pie seemed the only one okay out of all the mares here. All that aside, her eyes locked on her primary goal. An orange Alicorn mare with bright cerulean stood in front of her. Who are you? The Alicorn gazed strangely at Trixie. Surely she was joking about who he was. I mean, she called him Prince as nickname for Celestia's sake. What do you? Who am I? It's me, Naruto, you know, Prince of Ponyville. And why do you have 3 horns on your head? Naruto watched her eyes harden as the thought of him being, well, him sickened her. Don't change the subject, you imposter. There is no possible way that you are Naruto. I'm sure you have a reasonable explanation of impersonating, and I'll happily listen to it after I'm done beating you like the bitch you are. Her eyes glowed with anger at the thought of someone claiming to be her crush rubbed her the wrong way. Even if this mare had good intentions, she'd beat her senseless, and then make her show where she hid that lovable oaf. 3 horns or not, Trixie was not a pony to be messed with. Fine, then I can tell your brother that I went into an Ursa Major's stomach to rescue her flank for protecting 4 kids. The stallion snorted as he gazed at her shocked expression. Only 3 knew of that escapade, and he was sure that Zechariah hadn't seen the whole thing. Now tell me, why in Celestia do you believe I'm not Naruto Uzumaki? It's because he isn't or will ever be a mare. Her statement left him confused, angling his head down to see in between his legs. His stallionhood was missing, and if followed that train of thought he'd probably find the plot of a newly formed marehood if he cared to get a better look. The longer he craned his neck into that place, the more Luna's words replayed in his head, "Don't panic." He gazed back at Trixie as the thought of him being a mare permanently was at the forefront of his mind. The sounds of other mares shifting awake brought him back to reality. Spike giggled at Everpony here, and he could only imagine what the hatchling of a dragon was going to say to everyone once they realized what was going on. No, all we have to do is find Chrysalis and get her to change every pony back. Chrysalis didn't do anything, Spike, and if you single her out because of this, you'll regret it, Spike. Whatever you say, Nergirl. What was that? Your name, duh, what else am I supposed to call you? How about Naruto? I'm still the same stallion, you know, I just have mare parts instead. No, you get a new name instead since you're a girl, so Nergirl it is. Call me Naruko then. Ebony black hooves trotted the jungle, the smell of appreciation wafting in the air, like a delicacy she hadn't tasted in forever. Watching Naruto and his friends passed out set off alarms in the former changeling queen's mind. Her harlequin eyes gazed at Spike, his clawed fingers pointing towards her as accusations came from his mouth. The dragon was lucky she had the right mind not to point out how stupid his accusations was, especially when he was the only one unharmed. Didn't the term "leave not a trace behind" mean anything to the dragon? She had an inkling of what was going on, and if that inkling was correct, then she could end this whole issue before it became a hunt on blaming the poor changeling. She sucked in the appreciation once more. A sickly sweet taste erupted in her mouth as the changeling looked to the west. Her goal was that way. The cabin was barely a feet away from her. I hope you have a cure for those Trixster flowers you said, otherwise we'll be having a discussion over how to cure every pawn. The changeling's throat hitched as her eyes gazed at the hut before her. Masks littered the entrance as she walked closer to the hut. The sound of the zebra's voice screeched out through the hut's flimsy walls. Her hooves pounded against the door. Who goes there? Her turquoise eyes glancing at the door. It had been a long time since any pony dared to make an attempt of contacting her alone unless they had something ill planned for her. It's Chrysalis, the changeling you met earlier today. Zechariah, come out, I wish to speak to you about those flowers. The changeling brow furrowed as the wildlife seemed to find her standing still, vulnerable prey. She wondered which beast would pounce first. The smell of desire. The growls of irritation and hunger came from a beast or two as one walked into the clearing. A wolf made of tree branches growling as 3 more came out of the woodwork. Chrysalis slowly backed away from the door, her harlequin eyes trained on the pack steadily approaching her. How did you find me all the way out here in the forest of Everfree? Her hooves made no motion towards the door. The growls of timberwolves was always a nice way to signify some creature's death in the forest, and opening this door would invite all sort of trouble into her short life. I'll tell you after I take of this problem. You cannot be serious. Chrysalis didn't bother with any pleading as the 4 timberwolves slowly circled around her. The time for talk was over. They were impeding her from helping her new friends and Naruto, so that they would either have to leave or die, and they didn't seem too keen on the first option from the odorous gas spewing from their maws. The smallest lunged towards her only to be set ablaze by the changeling's magic. Its howls of pain did nothing but make the former queen cringe as the embers quickly died down, leaving a badly burned timberwolf in its wake. I gave a horrible burn. Now leave and lick your wounds, waiting for another piece of meat to come in waltzing in. Here speech was cut short as the burnt timberwolf lunged at her egg in a suicidal act from a creature with nothing to live for, saddened the changeling as the ashes brushed past her, its body incinerated by a higher magical flame. Her eyes watched the 3 remaining wolves escaping from the flames that flickered towards them. She held no qualm with killing the whole pack to assert her dominance. She had defeated many in the Badlands to suitors who her dad thought worthy only to be savagely defeated by her own hooves. Those lucky would die an honorable death by her hoof, those unfortunate lived. She might have had no qualms with killings those that threatened her or those she held dear. But she wouldn't embrace it like her kind so needlessly did. "You can open the door now," they left. "I doubt they will be returning any time soon." The zebra didn't budge a step, her held breath finally released as the thought of some pony so vehemently defeating the forest's natural predators with such swiftness. "You aren't lying to seek my medical aid, are you? This forest holds many predators that wouldn't hesitate to kill you and I for a quick meal." Her hooves slowly inched towards the door, her nostrils filled with the smell of burnt brittle bark coming from the outside of her door. "Zechariah, I'm more than capable of handling whatever those things were, but I need your help in an entirely different matter. My friends are ill, and I think you know the cause and treatment of it." She phased at the door, slowly opening, a simple gesture of invitation as she trotted forward, the ash from Timberwolf bouncing off with each step she made as the door closed behind her. Strabismus-ridden eyes couldn't believe what had unfolded in the past 5 minutes in front of her. One unicorn flailing about, his hooves slamming into the table, his eyes closed with his eyelids covered in white splotches, and a Pegasus trying to fly towards him only for her to fly backwards with each flap of her wings. "It's nice talking with you, Cardi, but I think I'll be going. Twilight shouldn't be too hard to find." She watched as the 2 gazed at her. This was some sort of act probably concocted to get ponies to leave the 2 alone. "Derpy, wait, take me with you." His head motioning towards the cafe's window, the opposite direction of the gray mailmare. "I want to get there, but I'm kind of indisposed at the moment." The stallion couldn't see anything, and each time he bothered to open his eyes a bright flash of light always greeted him no matter which way he turned. "What do you mean indisposed? You seem fine to me." The gray mare looked on in curiosity. Other than the white dots on the unicorn's eyelids, he seemed to have nothing wrong with them, unlike Rainbow Dash, who literally had 2 left wings at the moment. "I can't see anything, and I swear to Luna if some pony says because you got your eyes closed I'm going to hit them with a magic bolt." Dash looked at the unicorn, snorting as if anyone would dare take his challenge. Too bad Crescent didn't know her too well. "It is because your eyes are closed," cattle prod. Magenta Eyes watched as his horn glowed a sunny hue, wondering if he was going to let off a bolt of magic. Her fears faded as a card flew through the air randomly, as if it had no true destination in the first place. "Seriously, just open your eyes for a few seconds and I'm sure you'll see everything fine." She watched as his scarlet eyes opened. Dash's eyes beheld something she couldn't explain. On his eyes were countless splotches of azure blue, and the longer he kept them open the more it seemed it was straining him to do such a simple task. "You can close them now, I believe you." She gazed at his muzzle a little longer, figuring there was some reason to whatever was the cause of his predicament, or something because he stared at her last time she remembered seeing him. She was concerned for the stallion. Sure, she couldn't fly well at this moment, but she could adjust to it in a month or 2. She didn't call herself the best damn flyer in all of Equestria for nothing, but he was blind and everything he did required his sight. How was he going to adjust to that if there was no cure? "I need to see Twilight, so can you please take me with you, Derpy?" The stallion mane bristled as her heard footsteps approach him. He had no inkling of which way whoever was coming from, and that scared him, almost as the thought of being some helpless blind unicorn that couldn't even use his special talent because of his disability. The more he thought about his newly found shortcoming, the more he shuddered at his lack of eyesight. Crescent couldn't recall a pony being blind in Equestria. Sure, there were cases of strabismus like Derpy's, but nothing came to mind when lack of sight except the elderly, and even then they weren't blind. So he couldn't help but feel a little frightened of the situation. He wouldn't openly say, but he was sure they could see all over his muzzle. "Of course, I'll take you to Twilight, Cardi, that's what friends are for, right?" She smiled as Dash finally stopped next to him, her one semi-working wing draped over his body, acting as a guide to wherever Twilight Sparkle might be. She watched the stallion muzzle creep into a small smile. It was probably one of comfort, she couldn't tell, and she didn't need to know that he was less panicky than before. "All right, lead the way. They're at Naruto's, Derpy. Just lead us there and I'll handle escorting him." She hated being on the ground. It was restricting to the spectrum-colored mare. The trot back towards the Naruto's was about as slow as it could have been for Dash. She was so sure it had taken at least 3 hours as she matched the stallion step for step, her wing a guide and escort for him on their trip. With Derpy constantly veering off course and Crescent stopping as he tried opening his eyes again only to close them immediately afterwards. The cold white paint crackled on the house's siding. It had been the first time she ever paid any attention to it as her Pegasus companion reached for the door handle, her nose pressing against the front of the door, willing it to open. "What's wrong now, Derpy?" "It's locked, the door's locked." Her cross eyes turning toward the duo as the stallion snorted at the idea of it being locked. "Break it open." He couldn't see the looks the two Maras gave him, but he was sure at least one of them was one of a protest, his head moving around in irritation at the thought of being locked out of his own residence. "Dash, will you buck the door open and then we can rest for a bit?" Rainbow looked at the stallion, his muzzle hardened in thought as she retracted her wing. Finally she'd get to do something worth her time, and she was being told to do it, which made it all the better. I slammed my front hooves against the door, knowing they were my breadwinners, as the bounced soundly off the door. Despite the crappy-looking exterior, the door stood untouched. If I could fly properly, this door would be down in no time. We could break a window. I'm sure Naruto won't mind if we break in to get Cardi home. The soft click of the lock reverberated from the door as a crash came swiftly after it. The stallion didn't bother looking towards the sound. He didn't even need to know what happened. Someone unlocked the door while one of the two broke the window. "You know the door's unlocked now." The gray mare rubbed her front left hoof in mild embarrassment. The broken window next to her was a bit of broken glass as her hoof remained untouched miraculously. "Sorry, but you said break a window." Her eye looked on at the duo, Rainbow biting down on the doorknob, opening the door for them all as Derpy peered lazily through the broken window. Derpy watched as 6 Maras looked towards the open door as her good eye watched Rainbow dash escort him in. Detrot. A brief flash of aqua erupted in the suburbs of Detrot, one Azure Lulamoon and the other Fleur deise. It should have killed the stallion to teleport to such an exact location not a few hours ago, yet all he felt was a little winded. His magical prowess was truly back, and he doubted if any pony knew. With this knowledge, he knew he'd have to test it soon. The stallion's cold phthalo eyes looked at the hoodlums surrounding him, 19 earth ponies each with various cutie marks, and one unicorn with a lightning bolt on his flank glared at them. It didn't matter what they had thought, he was back in his prime, and if any of these pissants wanted to fight, then he would oblige every one of them as he ripped out each of their hearts. "Yo geezer, how about you leave that sweet little mare and be on your way, before you end up like those unis in South Detrot?" Azure looked at them all as they high-hoofed each other at the insult to whoever these unis were. The camaraderie only lasted a second as the splatter of blood painted the ground, Fleur's horn piercing one pony's chest as the tip of her horn protruded from his back. "Do not think us for some naive tourists. Now answer me this, how far is it to Africa?" The elegant mare said, her horn glowing a crimson red as it flung the body off her horn and into the ground. "Both are equally important, and the longer you take to ants dash." She watched as the water came to life. An elegant dance of magic and destruction befell every earth pony in the stallion's sight as the unicorn was the only left standing as he shivered. "You shouldn't kill just because you have power now. You'll just bring unwanted attention and bring Celestia's gaze ever closer to us." "It's Finn, I'm just testing myself after all. It's been a long time since I felt this much magic." Azure's eyes never changed as he grinned at the lone stallion. The frightful shrieks of death and carnage already filled his ears. It had been so long since he cut loose and did something other than teach magic or go to business meetings. A Lulamoon was born for action. It had always been that way. His hoof splashed in a puddle of one of the fallen earth pony's blood, his hoof tarnished. The smell of fresh blood was pungent to the stallion's nostrils. The fear of death seemed to leave the unicorn as his eyes hardened. Perhaps he'd be the one to test his limits as the pistachio hue covered his horn. A bolt of lightning shot out like the stallion predicted, only for it to veer off course and slam onto another citizen's house. "Bwahahaha, oh Celestia, that was so hilarious, and I thought this day couldn't get any better. Don't you dare diss me, I'm the best lightning user in all of Detrot, probably in Equestria." The stallion grinned as purple eyes fixated on him. "See, even she knows my superiority of the lightning Elim dash. You dare call that control? My husband would have made 20 of those bolts while you pitifully make one." She spat on the ground at the sheer thought of this brash little bastard being the best when she could name off countless superiors to their craft than this hoodlum. Oh yeah, and who's your husband, that poor sack of sherdash? It was instant as the stallion fell to the ground, electricity coursing through the unicorn's veins as his eyes sizzled and popped like kernels as his body twitched in place, electricity sparking off the former model's horn as she turned away. Take me to the Great Plains of Africa, Azure. I think it's time you meet one of my allies you shall be working with when it comes time to free my husband. She gazed at him, his horn already glowing in aqua blue. A brief flash, and they were gone. Earlier in Ponyville, the orange Alicorn resisted the urge to bash her head against the nearest wall as every pony began to wake up. She was in full-blown panic mode. Every pony had something severely wrong with, well, except for Pinkie Pie, Spike, and Fluttershy. And she could only imagine what the socially awkward pony would think if Fluttershy was to have something wrong with her. Okay, nothing wrong with two of them, that's better than none of them being okay, right? Her eyes scanned the Pegasus as she got up and meekly rubbed her hoof against the back of her head as her mouth opened. Is every pony all right? Her voice rang out in a deep tone as every pony's eyes fixated on where her gentle tone went. I'm sorry, please don't look at me. Naruto groaned at the deep tone that erupted from the meek mare. This wasn't expected but ruled out that she was an exception to whatever happened to them. Her gaze turned towards Pinkie Pie as dribbles of spit came out from an enlarged tongue. The former stallion didn't know if this was a blessing in disguise or just the cruel prank of some unknown force that gave them a brief reprieve from the worries they all held. Naruto's horn glow locking the door in case any pony ventured in for a nice little chat. All train of thought stopped on the word prank. These seemed harmless enough except that it preyed on almost every element of harmony. She didn't need to look towards Rarity to know the meltdown that was going to take place. She'd seen the pride she took in keeping her coat and mane as beautiful as it was, and now it was all ruined thanks to some cruel joke. Rarity, calm down and don't panic. It's going to be okay, we just need some time to figure everything out. Calmez-vous, regardez-moi que je suis un gakis et que vous êtes un fille Naruto. Tu style advena de l'Edalan. Que je suis tombé amoureuse quant out si tu as la fate et de amateur au gri de chaque sabot. Il s'agit de la pire chose jamais arriver dans l'histoire de la mode, et avec cette chose atroce qu'on appelait une crinière. Je vais jamais mis un pat or de cette maison encore car si j'ai la face. Je vais devenir la risée de tout Ponyville. Asterisk. The frillified mares glared at the others. Why couldn't she have gotten something like the enlarged tongue or the floppy horn? At least she could make excuses for that, but this was just a nightmare, especially in front of him. No, wait, her. She didn't bother looking at any of the maras that stared at her in confusion as she spoke French. This was a grave insult, and she couldn't dare speak in equestrian, as whatever should escape her mouth after that she feared would be crude insults. The jangle of the front door knob broke everyone out of their problems. Rarity heading off towards his room. What's wrong now, Derpy? The sound of Rainbow Dash's voice brought hope to the orange Alicorn's eyes. Maybe they know what happened. Her horn flickered with crimson as the door unlocked itself with a twist of his magic, the front window following soon after. The mare only winced in pain as Derpy's hoof pulled itself from the broken window, Crescent and Rainbow slowly walking in after one of them opened the door, both looking equally frustrated as Dash's wing finally left his side. So it happened to you three as well? I don't know what you mean by IT, but some weird freaky geeky magic stuff happened to us if that's what you're asking. Her eyes turned towards Twilight, who was busy trying to force magic out of her horn. Derpy's fine, but she needs some Epony's help, some pony really smart like Egghead over there. Her eyes averted only for a second as Crescent crashed into the furniture, his body upside down. She wasn't really bothered by the fact that all her friends seemed affected by whatever was being spread in Ponyville. Applejack's condition did scare her, though. The mare was one step away from becoming apple flat. Rainbow, I'd love to help Derpy, but I can't use my magic, so I can't really help her with whatever problem she's having. I'm sure one of the other ponies of Ponyville can help. Twilight glanced at her floppy horn once again as she sighed in frustration. Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't have to be me. Whatever problem Derpy is facing isn't life-threatening. Violet eyes watched as her Dash's face turned sour at the sheer thought of Derpy's problem. Just look at it then, go back to the horn magic thingy you do. Her gaze hardened as Derpy set the mailbag down, each mare gathering around to see what was so important. Naruto, open it, and then Twilight, you can tell Derpy that it's not that big of a deal. Her voice harshly sounded as the zipper slowly opened, revealing a pink lizard, that two of the ponies present wanting to end its existence. What is this? That is what we were coming to you for, Egghead. She didn't bother returning the glare sent her way. Being on the ground for this long just irritated Rainbow Dash, she was a Pegasus and she needed to fly. Well, as interesting as this is, I have only one thing to tell you, Derpy. You should bring this to Princess Celestia if she or Luna must know what this little guy is. Her eyes turned toward the strabismus mare as she reached for the mail bag. I'll be sure to send a letter to the princess to let her know that you seek an audience with her. Her words fell on deaf ears as the male mare had already left her to the glare of irritated Pegasus. So now we have Naruto, Crash Scent, Rainbow Crash, Tricky, Spiteye Pie, Flutter Guy, Appletiny, Rarity, and Twilight Flopple. Know that one, T-Work Floop and Sparkle? The pistachio-eyed baby dragon smiled to himself, ignoring the gales around him. I hope whatever this stuff is, goes away soon for that dragon's sake and every pony else. Naruto sighed one last time as Pinkie Pie patted him on the back. Chapter end.
Now watch daily exclusive and censored lemon stories and mature content, along with NSFW images, featuring Harem girls characters from the fics. Access all this and more on my Patreon. Click the link in the description to explore.